Well, what if we could see the way God sees? Lewis and Harriet Hayden knew what it meant to risk something big for something good. Enslaved in Lexington in the 1840s, they heard a different voice, a voice that said that they were created for freedom and for dignity. And so they heard that voice and they did everything. They risked everything to escape to the north. But once there, they did not stop. Their home became a place of refuge on the Underground Railroad. And they helped others who were seeking freedom. In today's gospel, Jesus calls us to listen, not just to his words, but to a new way of seeing the world. What begins in an ordinary conversation becomes a life-changing call and one of his greatest sermons. He is challenging his friends and us to see blessings and woes in a whole new way. He is turning the world actually right side up. You see, Jesus is filled with compassion for his followers. He invites them to hope for an experience of God's kingdom, a reality that is far greater than the oppressive rule of Rome that his disciples are feeling. He warns that in God's kingdom, chasing approval over truth will lead to woe. But he also promises that when we suffer, when we weep, when we're hungry, or when we live in fear, that we will not be forgotten. We will be blessed. And he even says we will leap for joy. Jesus' teaching turns our thinking upside down and then right side up, revealing that God's kingdom is already breaking in, even in the most unexpected places. So as we've been doing this sermon series on the art of listening, I have been thinking a lot about how hard it is to truly listen. Not just hearing words, but listening in a way that changes me, that opens my eyes to something new. What I'm talking about is listening for understanding instead of listening for a response. Now, there have been moments in my life where I thought I understood something, only to have my perspective completely shifted. And I did that by deeply, deeply listening. I listened to someone's story. I listened to a challenge I wanted to ignore, or I listened to a quiet nudge from God. And so today we hear Jesus calling us to listen, not just with our ears, but with our hearts and with our lives, to see God's kingdom breaking through where we least expect it, when we respond with compassion to the cries of those who suffer, when we recognize that true blessing isn't found in power, wealth, or comfort, but in being one with those in need. You see, God's vision is for us all to thrive, not just some. And when we truly listen, we begin to see God's vision unfolding around us. Listening deeply changes our perspective. And this is really important. Deep listening changes us because we discover who we are and whose we are. We know deeply in our souls that we are God's beloved, God's cherished children, all of us. And that is where the joy enters in. Because when we truly listen to God, we don't just hear a challenge, we hear belonging, we hear grace, and we hear the voice of love calling us forward. The Kentucky poet Frank X. Walker, whose work is deeply historical and deeply personal, reminds us that there is power in knowing who we are, and there is even more power in being unapologetic and courageous about who we are. And so I wonder, where is God calling us to be more courageous? It may not be a bold, history-making story like the Haydens, but courage is often found right in the middle of our everyday lives, in having the strength to speak truth, to stand firm, and to show up with clarity, and always with love. Listening to God helps us see past the noise of this world, to see what truly matters. It reminds us that we are beloved children, capable of courageous joy and celebration no matter our circumstances. And so today, as we gather for communion, we will hear Kenneth Overton sing this amazing spiritual, Steal Away. This art form arose from a people like the Haydens, who knew suffering but heard the voice of hope, calling them to freedom and to dignity. These are extraordinary songs, these spirituals. They are songs of strength, longing, and listening to God's cry and call to us to stand in freedom and with dignity. They remind us that hearing the call of Jesus, hearing the blessings and the woes, it's not just about listening with our ears, but also listening with our lives. To listen to where Christ is calling us, to stand with the blessed ones, and to risk something big for something good. One of my favorite blessings comes to us from William Sloane Coffin, a great preacher who preached in the 60s and the 70s, and it goes like this. May God give you the grace to never sell yourself short. Grace to risk something big for something good. Grace to remember that the world is too dangerous for anything but truth and too small for anything but love. That's the call of Jesus. The Haydens heard it. Do we? Because when we listen to God, we do not just hear a challenge, we hear a call to joy. A joy that gives strength, that gives courage, and that reminds us that we are God's own. So may we listen well. May we live boldly, and may we be filled with courageous joy. Amen.